Thank you for tuning into our podcast, Canal Days, What Life Was Like in the Industrial Connecticut River Valley of Massachusetts. I am your host, Carrie, and joining us today is Holyoke's very own local historian and creator of the historical tours of Greater Holyoke, Robert Comu. He personally offers and leads public and private tours, as well as presentations of historical sites within communities throughout the state of Massachusetts. Currently, the communities that he has chosen to focus on this year are Holyoke, Chicopee, South Hadley, and East Hampton, and also Granby and Amherst as well. His tours spotlight the local canals, reservoirs, cemeteries, and churches, as well as various parks, streets, and selected historical houses within each community. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the Cottage Hill Square Grove, located within Springfield, Massachusetts. So, where in the city is the park located?
It's in the Indian Orchard neighborhood or village of Springfield, and there it's a rectangular or square park, and there it's bounded by 4 streets, and they are Hampshire, Essex, Myrtle, and Oak streets. All of them have nice homes along them. Now, this park has a history, and we'll be considered that in one of our questions. And we're also going to consider some of the beautiful Victorian homes that are around it and what the park's future might hold, because it's more than just a park. And its sign that's there now says Cottage Hill Grove Square, established 1901. Now you notice the name is different there. Now I've checked many reference materials, including the Springfield, Massachusetts website of parks, and they always call it Cottage Hill Square Grove, because it's not only a park, it's also a grove of trees, that is an arboretum. And an improvement sign hooked below this sign, it says improvements to Cottage Hill Square in the Grove. They get it right there. Okay, so the sign is slightly off. Okay, but the park is a little bit older than the Seaman, and we'll consider that.
And explain the history of the park.
The park is from 1850, when the Indian Orchard Company formed. This was the company that was getting the Indian Orchard Canal going, the final company that really pushed to make the canal. The other 2 failed before it. And they got the mills that they had in there, and they bought up a lot of worker spaces, make worker homes. But of course, when you make a village, a worker village, you need to have schools, cemetery, churches, and parks. And this is one of the many parks in Indian Orchard. Indian Orchard has quite a few parks for being a small village, and that is wonderful. So they formed in 1850. It was private land until 1901, when they finally gave it away to Springfield to be part of their public park systems. So it has a very unique history to it. And not only is that, it's also a fishing arboretum. And an arboretum is a place where scientific study of trees can be done. And that is wonderful. So we'll talk about that later. And also remember that there's a lot of Victorian homes around here, because sure, it might have some worker homes in the beginning and still ones around, but then they took those down and put up Victorian homes as the middle class started to develop in Indian Orchard itself. So the park has a lot of interest and history to it.
And quickly, before we continue with our interview, just to fill our listeners in, for more information or to sign up for any of his various tours, you can check out his website at holyokecanaltour.org. And there you can find videos and podcasts of the stops along each of his tours, as well as photos and text of the historical sites throughout as well. And for private tours and other inquiries, you can email him directly at bobcat4214, capital B, @yahoo.com. And his tours make for fun, educational, outdoor activities for families and group parties. Getting back to our interview, what are some of the types of houses right around the park?
All right, I'll give you 3 examples. Just walking around the park, you'll come up with some very unique looking homes. And that's part of the reason why you should walk around this Grove Park. But first of all, the Chapman Valve Manufacturing Company Agent House at 140 Oak Street. What does that mean? Well, there was a mill in Indian Orchard called the Chapman Valve Mill, and agent for that mill lived in a house on this park at 140 Oak Street. Now, an agent is very important. An agent nowadays almost would be called a CEO or Chief Executive Officer. Agent means like agent in charge of everything, person in charge of all. They want the oversight of everything to make sure that the company's going in good directions. And so basically the president of a company lived around there. And that's why some of these homes are quite beautiful. Now, another very unique house I found here is James Pease House, which is from the year 1908, and it's at 115 Essex Street. And it looks well taken care of. It's a beautiful Victorian home and nicely painted. And then lastly, I'll mention one more, and there's many. I could mention 20 if I wanted to. The Charles Thayer House. It is from the year 1913, and that's on at 146 Myrtle Street. And that also, of course, is a Victorian home, and it still has its two original porches opened. It's not boxed in, which is hard to find for Victorian homes. And it is quite large, to say the least, and well taken care of.
And what will the future hold for this park?
I'm thinking develop that arboretum a little bit more, make it easier for young school children, for instance, to go around, even on their own, and figure out what kinds of trees and what the trees' properties are and how it fits into nature. So it has nameplates on these trees in the typical fashion of arboretum, but explanation below them for each of the different types of trees found in the park would be great. Even bring school children for a nature outing here would be great. And also planting more different species of trees. Say there's 30 trees or 40 trees in this park. About 20 of them are oaks. And I think get a more variety in there. There also is a beautiful place towards the east section of the park where it's a circular place where flowers are planted. And that might also be good for nature study. Put out what kind of flowers are planted there that year, so it might be a temporary sign. And also make a map of the trails through here and make it available on our park's website and make a paper-based map. All these things would be very useful for adults who want to go through and learn about the trees and school children in groups. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Robert, for educating us on your tours and historical topics of your expertise. And we want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And you can check out a large selection of our other podcasts on his website as well as on SoundCloud.com. And be sure to check for new videos and podcasts posted daily. And thank you for joining us.